Last week, we spoke with Heather Dane, co-author of The Bone Broth Secret, about how bone broth solves many health issues as well as addressing problems of food waste and poverty in our country. This week, we continue discussing the controversies over adding apple cider vinegar to your broth, as well as discussing how her co-author Louise Hay intuits affirmations for healing disease and picking the best item on a menu. Coming up next on the Nutrition Heretic Podcast.
Meet Gina. Gina wanted to lose weight, so she spent 2 years fasting, detoxing, and dabbling with vegan diets while practicing a shit ton of yoga to lose 25 pounds. But it took so long that nobody noticed. Then, Gina started Frenching her food by eating fatty cheeses, butter, sausages, and red meat, and lost 15 more pounds in only 2 months. Everybody noticed this time. Frenching your food unlocks the riddle of weight loss that skinny French chicks use to slim down, look young, and live longer despite doing everything wrong. Be like Gina. Start Frenching your food today by visiting nutritionheretic.com/Frenching.
Fat is bad for you.
I just pop a pill and I'm fine.
Meat is murder.
It's time for bad food punishment. It's time for real nourishment. It's time for the Nutrition Heretic.
The following program is provided as information only and may not be construed as medical or health advice. It is not intended to diagnose, treat, or cure any disease. No action or inaction should be taken solely on the basis of the information provided here. Please consult with a licensed healthcare professional or doctor on any matter relating to your health and well-being.
So, tell me, the one thing that I thought was pretty cool was you talked about apple cider vinegar and whether or not that should be, as a requirement, added to your bone broth.
Yeah, I found that really interesting because I found a study from 1934. It was a British study, and they had done several things with bone broth. They were trying to decide if bone broth was healthy. Of course, this has been going on since, like I said, the 1600s when they started studying gelatin. Is it healthy? Is it not healthy? And so as they were in the lab with a number of different techniques trying to figure out how to extract the minerals, and they were really only looking at minerals and not collagen.
Right.
They found that within 1 hour, you could extract all of the vegetable vitamins and minerals that you needed. So for anybody who's making bone broth with vegetables and they think it tastes too swampy, I say wait till the last 45 minutes to an hour and throw it in.
Right.
And then the bones themselves, even without turning on the heat, within 7 hours, the minerals would all come out into the water. And it didn't make a difference whether you used apple cider vinegar or not.
Right.
I think that there is a wisdom, though, because a lot of science is not always looking for the same things we're looking for.
Yes.
We don't know if they weren't looking at collagen in that particular study. So we don't know if the apple cider vinegar is helping to release the collagen into the as part of the process of hydrolysis, which is we heat it up and we then extract the collagen into gelatin in the bone broth. We don't know if that's part of it, but I suspect, and I actually called Dr. Kayla Daniel, who wrote Nourishing Broth with Sally Fallon Morell, and we talked about it because she contributed a recipe to the book, and we were kind of talking about what do you think about this study, and she was very aware of it. And she thinks the study is sound, and I did too, as we looked at all of what they did. And we were sort of like, why do you think we're still using apple cider vinegar? And we all thought, Louise, Kayla, and I all thought that it had something to do with the cleansing properties of apple cider vinegar. So the Weston A. Price Foundation published a study where they found that with pork, if you soaked it in an apple cider vinegar and water, the pork would actually become healthy for the human body. So without preparing it in that way, it was it could create like a sort of a dirty blood type situation if you
Right.
looked at it under a dark field microscope. But if you use the apple cider vinegar, that process didn't happen. I think the Chinese knew that, because what they would do with bone broth is when they were using pig's feet or something, or even in general, they would parboil.
Yes.
We don't do this here, but they do. I mean, some people might do it. We roast sometimes, but we don't parboil. And so they would parboil, so quickly boil it for about 5 minutes, ditch the water,
Right.
and now start fresh with this cleansed meat, cleansed bones. And I think that our version was throw in the apple cider vinegar, let it sit for a little while, and then turn on the heat. And that
Right.
was the way of cleansing out any impurities from the whatever we're using, particularly from a pig's feet or pork bone perspective.
Right, right. And I know another thing the Chinese do as well with pork stocks in particular is they add chunks of ginger in there
Yes.
to kind of purify the experience, even just the olfactory experience.
Exactly. So I think there's wisdom in there.
Yeah.
And I use it just because I believe that. And,
Right.
and until somebody does a real double-blind, blah, blah lab study, I'm just going to trust the fact that we know apple cider vinegar is a very good cleansing food. And there's got to be a reason in there that we just haven't looked at yet.
Right. It's one of those things that, when I told you I started making broth for myself right around 92. And I was always getting gelatin, out of it. So when I read that, I was like, well, maybe I can get more. So I just started doing it. I was like, well, cider vinegar is not bad for me. So even if it's not but I still, it doesn't always make it to the pot. And I don't want people to feel that, oh, well, now I ruined my bone broth. I didn't put the cider vinegar.
Right. Right.
So that's important, I think, because somebody had a really good quote. I forget who it was now. I was speaking to a few weeks ago, and they said, in America, we've become a nation of technicians, where we're told, you have to say, add the cider vinegar to the bone broth, or you have to drink X number of cups per day for this condition. Because I'm sure as a nutritionist, you get these kinds of questions all the time. Well, how much should I have? What should I do? I have this with my knee. What should I do about it? And not understanding that the prescription is different for everyone.
Yes.
And that, as long as you're working towards the goal, there's no perfect scenario that can just magically, appear from thin air. So, I just wanted you to expand on that bit about the cider vinegar, because like you said, do we need the science to come in before we know that, the tradition has been there. Our ancestors were a lot smarter than us guys,
They were. And, I think that they used their intuition more than we did, because they didn't have science. We often use science as a crutch, like the person you interviewed was saying about technicians. And I think that we've got to learn to trust ourselves a little bit more. I mean, I actually talked to Kayla about this too, because she said she always, like me and probably like you, gets the question, how do I know if it's gone bad?
Mm-hmm.
And
Smell
our
it.
ancestors used to smell it, right? Exactly. Or you taste it. I mean, if you're not sure from the smell, you taste it, and then and you spit it out, and you're done. And it's kind of like we're so afraid to do that now, because we're used to expiration dates and somebody else telling us.
Right.
Yet we didn't realize that expiration dates don't mean anything.
Except
and that a lot of
it's rotating the food on the shelf is what it's doing. More than anything.
Exactly. And it's in most cases things don't expire that are processed anyway, because they've got like chemicals that make it last forever in there.
If you can call it that.
Right. And we if we can learn, if we're eating real food and we can learn to smell it, we know what mold smells like in a berry, so that we can skip eating that berry, and we know what a bad batch of bone broth is. I always say leave the fat cap on the top.
Yeah.
And then until you're ready to eat it, because the fat cap preserves.
Right.
If you, I started making confit, which is sort of like the version of bone broth only using fat. So you cook your duck or you cook your turkey underneath this layer of duck fat or chicken schmaltz or something like that. And what our ancestors did is that they would actually leave that out. They leave the leftover duck or chicken or turkey out underneath the layer of fat. And when they did that, they could leave it out for like a month or more under the fat because fat acts as a preservative.
Right. It locks out all the oxygen.
Exactly. And so I could do a confit, and then whatever leftovers I had, I could leave sitting in my refrigerator under 3 inches of the fat that was used for the confit. Scrape that off, and it's full of gelatin and meat, and make that as a meal at some point, and then render the fat and use it again. And again, this is where we get like duck fat is a pretty expensive and prized fat, but you can use it over and over again if you're making confits with it. And when you're making a confit, you're infusing the fat with collagen.
Mm-hmm.
And when you render it, you can cut that piece off that still has the little bit of collagen and broth in it. And that becomes this healing food that you can use for other things. So we start to realize that, we didn't get taught to do this by anybody in science, maybe in nutrition science, but not even when I was in school in the 80s, they didn't show me how to do any of this.
Yeah. But
it's like, you just kind of have to try it. Like people trying to make fermented foods for the first time, everybody thinks it's spoiled and they're afraid, but we have to trust our senses. And this is when we learn to trust our senses, we learn to trust our intuition. And that's where we don't have to ask somebody, how many cups do I need? Because it's okay to ask an expert. That's okay. But there's a part of us that goes into the body and says, that expert told me this, but I'm finding for me, I need a little less, a little more, something like that. And we learn to trust what our body is calling us to do.
Right.
And I think that's the magic of blending all of this exciting new technology with all of those time-tested, healthy things that our ancestors just did because that's what they did. They lived on the earth and they knew it better than we know it. And we can't lose those secrets because our bodies haven't changed.
Yes.
So we have to hold on, I think, to those secrets. And I think that autoimmune conditions and incurable illnesses that are on the rise are really just a call. It's not something to be afraid of.
Yes.
It's actually a call to go back to some of our old ways and not to lose them.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. Because, there is a blessing in disease.
Yes.
Everybody sees it for the scary thing that lays ahead, whether it's cancer or, especially cancer, AIDS or just autism, just all of these different disorders that people are plagued with today, the autoimmune disease, the lupus, etc. And, we just keep getting further and further away. Like we're looking out there for the answer, but the answer is like in us. It's like, it's so intimate, and we're trusting these entities that are outside of us to tell us what to do. And it's just not like that. Right now I'm actually taking, as soon as we're done here, I'm running off to my Master Food Preservers course. And the first thing they do in that course is scare the bejesus about disease. I learned more about disease than I have in any medical book or anything, because everything is about the foodborne illness. And a couple of us just kind of sit there and roll our eyes. We're like, yeah, well, we just smell it.
Exactly.
But, then there's just the contradictory messages from I'm just going to call it the establishment, right?
Yeah.
Because on the one hand, they're telling us, don't eat this because it doesn't have anything. But then, then they're like, well, you got to have, X amount of vitamins and it's killed by that. But you can't eat that because it's got microbes. So
Exactly.
you find yourself in this, between a rock and a hard place, basically.
Yes.
Where you're not allowed to eat things. So yeah, we need to definitely trust ourselves a lot more. And by the way, I'm going to give you one recipe. If you eat masa, like masa harina, the fermented corn, tamales made with that duck fat from your confit, delicious.
That sounds fabulous.
I made a tamale pie. And I put bone broth in it. And then I had this leftover confit, and it was taking up space in my fridge. So we had used the duck meat the night before, and I had the fat sitting there, and it had all the roasted garlic and the herbs. Oh my God.
Wow.
So fabulous.
I hope you're going to give everybody a link to that because we all want it now.
Yeah, I didn't take a picture. I was just, we went through it so fast. It was just like me and my girls, and we couldn't stop ourselves. It was, yeah, I'm not good at taking pictures of things. But yeah, I'll find the rest. I'll try to remember how I created it the first time.
Fabulous.
So, actually, I just want to ask you before I let you go, I want to ask you a couple of questions about Louise, because you talk a lot about her in the book. Obviously, she's your co-author. But, when she wrote You Can Heal Your Life, I recall her talking about her diet, which at the time seemed pretty vegetarian. And I don't remember her mentioning bone broth. I certainly don't remember her mentioning bone marrow.
Yeah.
Was she leaning towards a vegetarian diet, and what? I'm just wondering if you guys ever talked about what the shift was, where she moves from kind of eating lots and lots of vegetables throughout the day, and maybe just some berries in the morning, to moving more towards organ meats and bone broth. And realizing that, because I think a lot of people, when they go on the spiritual path, which, I think we all consider her to be on a very spiritual path, they think that the first thing you got to do is give up meat.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's just this knee-jerk reaction that you can't be spiritual and eat meat.
Right.
So, what do you know what happened there, where she was just like, this isn't meeting my needs anymore, and I need to go back?
Yeah, she's always been intuitive about a lot of things. She always talks about how when she wrote You Can Heal Your Life, she's dropped out of high school, really 8th grade.
Wow.
And so it's not like she considers herself this brilliant person, even though she is. Right. But she's highly intuitive. And so when she talks about writing You Can Heal Your Life, she feels like she channeled a lot of it intuitively. Okay. And yes, it was based on her learnings and things like that, but still a lot of it came to her intuitively. And she did the same thing with nutrition. I know for a fact she's taken many, many, many classes. Mm-hmm. She's actually did raw food for a while. She did vegan and vegetarian. She did macrobiotics. She tried a number of things as she sort of went through the years. And she had cancer in the late 70s. Right. And, she didn't want to go through the whole traditional medical path. And so she started really looking hard at nutrition, and some of the things that one of the big things that she was taught to do was take 2 ounces a couple of times a day of asparagus, ground up, heated, cooked, and then pureed asparagus in 2 ounce servings a day. She didn't know back then, and I don't even know if she knew when we were talking about it, that asparagus is a good source of glutathione, the detox antioxidant, but she just did it because, she was told to do that, and she changed her diet, and she really got serious. She said, this is an opportunity for me to walk my talk with my teachings. And she got really serious about her own teachings about affirmations. And it changed everything, including it. Not only did she heal, and then she had a diagnosis of no cancer, but she also, her work got better and her clients started healing faster because she was sort of living into her belief system in a way that she hadn't before. Right. And now over the years, because she's always tried things, she's still a lover of vegetables, and she's still, and all of that, but she listens to her body, and she calls her intuition her inner ding, and she's always listening to her inner ding. And she goes and sits to the refrigerator and stands there and says, hi baby, you're going to give me some good food. She says some nice little affirmations, and then she decides what she wants, and that's what she has. And I wouldn't be surprised if over the years, again, we as collagen drops, we have to find a way to replace it. And the only food on the planet that has collagen is animal protein. Yes. I haven't checked Louise's genes for any kind of defective collagen genes, because we all have some. It just depends on how many you have, what things are going to start failing as we get older, depending upon some trigger in life. And again, it could be anything. It could be menopause. Could be a trigger, to turn a gene switch on. So instead of being afraid of that, we say, okay, I'm going to use my food as medicine. And in Chinese medicine, they always say meat for strength, vegetables for cleansing, grains for energy.
Yeah.
And there are going to be times that we need to turn off the energy system of grains because our insulin system is not going well and we're not working hard enough to need all of that energy. And so the small intestine doesn't even have enough energy to digest it well. And so we need to move the grains out for a little while.
Right.
There are times that our body needs strength instead of cleansing. We can't cleanse 24/7 and be healthy. But if we have cancer, we might want to go through a raw vegan or a juicing or some kind of thing and cleanse.
Right.
But at some point, we need to strengthen.
Exactly.
And so what do we do? How do we do that? And so I think intuitively she's always loved bone broth. She learned about it from Julia Child.
Yes.
She would watch the Julia Child show all the time, and she loved it, and she loved making bone broth, and she loved the taste of it. She had no sense that she didn't know about collagen. Nobody knew about collagen.
Right.
I mean, they weren't talking about it back then. So she just knew that she felt better.
Yeah.
And I know people in their 70s today. Louise is 90, but I know people in their 70s who started having bone broth, and they're really healthy today in their 70s. They're still working, they're still strong, they're still vital. And they said, well, I just feel better when I have it. So that's why I have it,
Right.
And then there are those of us who it brought our life back, And so I think at some point we have to admit that there is a reason why these foods are there. I'm as a Native American, I believe that everything in life has a voice, a meaning, and a purpose. And for me, that includes plants.
Yes.
And I'm Haudenosaunee, which many people know as Iroquois. And we had the three sisters, which are corn, beans, and squash. And so they meant something to us. We have stories about the three sisters and why they make such a great organic safety net in terms of a food system.
Yes.
And we don't want to waste anything. When I think of people juicing and throwing away the pulp, to me, that's just as bad as factory farming.
Yes.
Because it's waste. It's like I'm taking this teeny little bit, but I need like 80 carrots just to get it. And I'm now wasting all of the rest of that food. And to me, it feels like waste. I'm not looking at the food system as I don't want to tax our food system. I think that if we were to stop looking at meat as Louise and I think those of us who are more spiritual about how we want the earth, how we want to coexist on earth with all beings, we think about humane ways of doing things. And when we were hunter gatherers, we prized it. In Native American medicine, there's no death. There's the soul lives. The body dies, and so it's a whole different thing. But there's a prayer and a ceremony over an animal, and every single part of that animal is used with reverence and respect and honor, and it's known as having healing properties. We don't just say, oh, we only want 15%; the rest of it goes.
Right.
So I feel like the way we look at food, we don't feel sorry for plants because plants don't have a face.
Right.
But it's very arrogant because today we know from science, they're debating calling it plant neurobiology. We know plants have a system of thinking and feeling. We know they feel emotions when there's danger. The plants warn their kin before the other plants, but then they warn everybody else. But they go to their kin first.
Yes.
Which is so human.
Right.
They feel pain. The reason that they don't have a face and they don't have organs like us is because they're stuck in the ground. And when you come at them with a lawnmower or when you come at them with some sort of device to pull them out of the ground, they can't run.
Right.
So it's a different, I don't know which you'd rather be. You want to be something that runs, or do you want to be something that's stuck to the ground? I don't know, but we all feel we're all sentient beings, and I think it's very arrogant to think that one is more important than the other. I don't feel more important than the tree outside of my house, and I think it's just a different way because in the Native American culture, we grow up believing nature is a relative.
Yes,
the trees are
their ancestors, right?
Yeah, they're relatives, and the trees are relatives, and the Mother Earth is a relative, and and grandmother moon is a relative, and everything in nature is related in some way and important and esteemed in some way. And so it's just such a different way of thinking. And it would in that way of thinking, when we think of everything as a relative, we don't want to treat animals or plants meanly. We don't want to spray glyphosate and herbicides and pesticides on plants.
Right. And we don't want to throw away their tissue without a prayer, without some reverence for that loss of life.
Yes.
And because I always tell people chlorophyll is blood. It's plant blood.
Exactly. And because of our harmful plant practices, the Earth's soil is devoid of the minerals we need to be healthy.
Right.
That very sort of core element that we need to be healthy is missing in soil, which is my theory of why grains are so bad today, because the anchor to hold the blood sugar down is minerals, and we don't have it. So we're growing grains without an anchor. And
makes sense.
I think that our food system, our farming system is the problem. It's not what people are eating. If we learn to go no waste, we could be very spiritual about the food that we eat and the food as medicine. I think that it's not until someone gets really sick that you can understand without anger that they may actually need meat as part of their healing.
Right.
And, to be really honest, I mean, I don't say this a lot, but we're all part of the food chain. If anybody thinks that there's not bacteria and virus that are trying to hunt us right now in our bodies, if anybody thinks that we're not part of the food chain as we sit here right now,
right,
we're not understanding the cycle of life. We're all part of the cycle of life. We're all hunting and being hunted. It is for me, the most humble aspect of being a living being is to know that we are all part of the food chain in some way, and that we have to, because of that, we have to learn to respect every being, including ourselves and the bacteria and virus that are hunting us right now.
Well, yeah, you think about cancer. I mean, what do you say? Cancer is eating away at this organ, right? It's we don't see it because, again, no eyes and face, right?
Yes, exactly.
We ignore that.
Exactly. So we're all part of the food chain, and it's this is where, this idea of I am safe, the affirmation, I am safe, right. I am safe, I am safe. We all have to come to terms with the fact that we are living in an unpredictable world, and the more we can learn to trust ourselves and to be safe, and to stay in a place of trying to understand that all of us living here have different ways of approaching our lives, and instead of fighting each other, we learn to have a better system.
Yes.
We learn to have a better way. We live in cities. We don't grow food so much anymore. We need to find a better way to feed the human race than we've already found right now. And we can't, if we get lost in fighting each other about what we're eating to stay healthy, we're not going to have energy to change the system.
Exactly. And I just want to add, to what you were saying before, is like, we've gotten rid of the practice of saying grace.
Yes.
Just that moment of reverence and appreciation for whatever the earth turned up for you that day.
Yes.
And it's such just feeding into that disconnect between how it got there. Even if you're just buying it at the store and you don't see the soil that the animal was raised on or the plant was picked from, the reverence for the fact that somebody had a job and had to pay for that,
Right. Yes.
Like we're so disconnected, and it's you're right. We've gotten incredibly arrogant, in our expectations and our perceptions of which kingdom is of more value.
Yes. To be spiritual, we can't. Spirituality is not an idea of being superior by deciding that I'm going to do this and therefore I am more spiritual than someone else.
Yes.
I think that part of spirituality is having a sense of humility for being a living being in this cycle of life. There is I feel like I'm constantly in a process of learning from other people, to be humble, to stand up for what we believe in, but also to be humble about what I still need to learn and what I still need to understand. And, I don't know that, no one really has any full 100% agreement on how we should be living our lives. But I think that if we're in constant question of, staying in our own space and saying, what is it that I believe I need to be doing? And how can I be supporting people in and supporting all of our beings, all of the earth? We would be approaching things a little bit differently. We wouldn't fight so much. We would maybe try to band together and make change.
Right. And I keep bringing up the election, but, but since the election, it's become more and more apparent to me how, and I think to a lot of people, and even Obama said this, that we need to focus on our communities. Mm-hmm. Just like right where you are. So much of the anger and the discord that we're seeing in the world right now stems, in my opinion, from us, again, looking out there on a global scale instead of looking at what's happening right here within my community. Because once you bring it into your sphere of neighbors and friends, it becomes much easier to show compassion, to understand that, yes, I have my belief, but I cannot impose that on someone else.
Yes.
And, really, I guess we're getting a little off topic, but and let's just take food as an example. A lot of people, they follow the vegan, the paleo, whatever, and they want to shove it down everyone's throat. Mm-hmm. And they want to do it on this massive scale. But what about the person, like when you sit down, you actually talk to the people in front of you, your clients or whatever, you realize, wow, this person can't digest vegetables.
Right.
Maybe it's not right for her. Maybe my ideal isn't right for that person, but it's very easy to dispense that information and, hold up signs that you're anti-abortion and don't kill babies and Hillary this and Trump that. But, you got to start at home, right? Yes. You always have to start within your own backyard.
Yes. I was really fortunate to interview 4 women peacemakers who won a sort of spot at the University of San Diego, and one was from Pakistan. They were from Pakistan, Nigeria, Algeria, and Kenya.
I think I heard about this.
Yeah, and one of the things they said, because I interviewed them right before the results of the election, and I was asking them, how do you have courage and strength to keep going? And standing up for what you believe in. And one of the things they said is it has to really matter to you. It has to be something that matters to you. And it has to be like you start locally.
Yes.
You start in your own community. And many of them went from mother to mother in their communities. Many of them, that was their big thing. They went from mother to mother and woman to woman and talked to each person and then created a community of support from there. But it was something that mattered to them, and it was something that they did they started within their communities, and then it grew. And so I love what you say when you're like, let's start in our own backyards. Let's start with something that really matters to us, and let's listen, because that was one of their other tips is the reason the wars were happening. They were in war-torn countries creating peace, and the reason the war was happening was because people hadn't sat down to listen to each other. And it wasn't until they did that they were able to actually start creating peace.
Yes, exactly. When you have those real human connections. Yes. It changes because you realize it's not all black and white. There's so much gray in between there, right?
Exactly.
So, you talked, we kind of, I guess we segued here from talking about intuition, right?
Yes.
And you were describing, Louise's intuition. Now, have you been able to learn that art of intuiting what's right for you in the moment? What, you look in your fridge or you look at a menu. Because I always choose the wrong thing. My husband chooses the most delicious thing, which is usually pasta, unfortunately, but he always chooses the best thing on the menu. Me, not so much. So what is that? And the other reason why I want to bring this up is because when we talked about it before, I'm sure there were people out there saying, well, my intuition says I want a jelly roll.
Yeah. Craving versus intuition is a sort of a little bit of an art. And I think how I would describe it is in 2 ways. One is that we get signals besides a craving besides like a feeling of what we want to eat. Sometimes we get a signal besides that. So I would explain that by saying that when my digestive system was still really taxed, I didn't know when I was hungry because things weren't moving through my system properly. And so what would happen is I would think about food at times when I thought I shouldn't be eating. Yes. Because I wasn't hungry. But what I learned that was I really listened to my body. So I always say keep a food mood journal, keep a diary of how you're doing throughout the day and what signals you're getting, what emotions are coming up, what symptoms, physical symptoms are coming up, what ideas are popping up into your head. So I kept having this thinking about food when I didn't think I was hungry, and I was judging myself and I would ignore it because I'm not hungry. But then I noticed this little pattern that 20 minutes after I was thinking of food, I would be in a blood sugar emergency. Like an emergency. Now, once I was in that emergency, I would consider it like how people describe a migraine. People who've had migraines will tell me that they can tell that they're ignoring certain things that their body needs as the pattern of build up to the migraine. And then once they get it, they can't, it's not just about stopping work for a little while or eating something or getting some water. It's about now they have to close all the doors and pull down the shades and go to bed for the rest of the day. What happens to me when I got into blood sugar emergency is I would be so ravenously full of cravings and so ravenously hungry for the rest of the day that it was as if I could not solve the hunger. Yeah. Now, I had a lot of pain, so I was also in pain during that time. For people who think that they're like such binge eaters that they can't stand it and they go crazy and they can't stop eating and they don't know why, I would say, watch what's happening in the buildup of that pattern. What I learned was that if I listened to the thought of food, the minute I started thinking about food, I said, ooh, I better eat now because my digestive system, the brain in my body, is impaired right now. And it's not giving me the hunger signal when I should be getting it. So I actually don't get it until too late. Yeah. And so if I trust my thought instead of judging myself, I eat. And then I don't have that problem for the rest of the day. So your body, if you've got a pain or something that's keeping you from getting appropriate signals, something else will kick in. Mm-hmm. But if we judge ourselves because we're dieting or we're whatever reason we're judging ourselves, I have a craving for meat and I'm a vegetarian and I'm judging myself and I keep feeling sick and I don't know why. You know, these signals that we're getting are there for a reason. Mm-hmm. And so I always say it's worth experimenting and then taking notes. Yes. And little by little, I realized they say that in order to alleviate doubt, you collect proof. Mm-hmm. So you try it, you write it down, and you say, oh, look, that worked. And then the next day it worked again. And now I'm not having those binge fests because I didn't listen to that one thought of food when I thought it was the wrong time of day. All that's over because I'm listening to my intuition. As my digestive system healed, my hunger became real. So I was then able to say, oh, look, I'm really hungry because I'm getting a physical signal now instead of a mental one. So I think little things like that. The other thing I started looking for was when I was eating foods that worked for me, it's that grace, saying grace before a meal, the prayer of gratitude to thank the entire food chain and all the people who participated in it, all the beings that contributed, plant and animal, who contributed to this meal, and then eating mindfully so that I was listening to all of my senses while I was doing it. Yeah. I was able to move from a cravings-based, which is your tongue talking to you, your taste buds, to a body-based intuition where I started to feel what satisfied my third chakra, hara, the center of the body. When I satisfied that part of my body and I listened for it, do I feel satisfied? Mm-hmm. Because if I ate something and I didn't, I'd think about it, I'd write that down. I didn't feel satisfied. Here's what I ate. Yeah. Try something else. Did I feel satisfied? Wow, that really worked for me. Now this changes today. For 3 months, it may be one thing. And now I'm in a new season. It's wintertime and it's something else. So we've got to keep it. We don't get the signal and we're done. It's kind of like this is the journey of
ongoing.
Listening.
Yeah, it's ongoing. Yeah, for sure.
So I learned and I took notes and I learned and now I listen for that feeling in my center of my body, the power center, the hara center, third chakra. Do I feel satisfied? If I do, all of my energy is in that area and I feel grounded. Yes. If I don't, it's up in my head.
Right.
And I don't feel grounded. I feel scattered. I feel off. And if I start eating foods that I crave that don't really work for me, and I know they don't because I've taken notes and I've learned, my energy is up in my head, and I do start to continue to feel cravings, and it doesn't feel good, and I don't feel grounded. And that's when I know I'm not honoring my intuition. I have days like that still.
Mm-hmm.
I do still have that where I'm like, you know what? I picked something healthy, but maybe I want a little extra fruit today because I'm really feeling like having a lot of fruit, and a lot of fruit doesn't really work for me, but today I want it.
Yeah.
I know I have to buckle my seatbelt and stay calm because my energy's up in my head. So I've got to just kind of, if I'm going to do that one day because there's not something else around or whatever, I didn't get to go to the grocery store, I just kind of stay mindful in other areas of my life because I can feel the energy up in my head instead of where it's supposed to be keeping me grounded.
Right.
So I think we just like, if we just learn to, we have to be compassionate with ourselves.
Yes.
We can't always be perfect. We have to listen for those things. And the more we listen, the more we can take loving action to our body instead of either judging ourselves or trying to force something that doesn't really work. Now that I know what that grounded feeling feels like, that's what I crave more. I crave that more. So I spend most of my time fulfilling that deep need of that third chakra satisfaction as opposed to what's on my tongue at the moment.
Right.
It has to taste good.
Right.
I'm not saying that it doesn't taste good, but I choose less of the my natural thing would my most imbalanced way of eating would be to eat too many sweet foods.
Mm-hmm.
But I choose more of the grounding foods because I've come to love and honor that feeling of grounding inside that third chakra area of my body.
Right, right. Yeah, that's so important to know. And I think it's going to be, anybody listening, that this is one of those things that, just be patient with yourself to get to understand that. I'm going to try and implement that. I know that when I tried to do the GAPS diet, I got about a week in, not even a week, maybe 5 days. And I just couldn't look at another bowl of bone broth.
Yeah.
I had, but not only that, I lost pretty much every instinct I had to eat.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, because that's the thing is I normally eat it anyway.
Yeah.
So where somebody else might be transferring over from a diet of like KFC and McDonald's, they will probably be able to do that longer. But I think I had just met that threshold super early in the deal.
And your body is saying, probably I need a little break. I need something solid. I need something, a little bit different. And, I love that you're aware of that because then you can make the adjustment and then you can watch and see what happens. And after a while, we start to learn the language that our body speaks to us in, because everybody's language is different. And, that's why I like keeping a food mood symptom journal, because we learn to listen for the signals our body gives us. And we learn that new language.
Right.
We learn the language of food we put into our body and how our body responds. And it's a learning process. And this is, for me, is not something that happened overnight. I mean, this is years of first getting rid of the pain. So I had a clean slate. And then really listening for the first thing I was listening for was what doesn't give me pain. Then it was like, bingo, I know what I should be eating. But then it was deeper than that. It was what makes me feel grounded and what keeps my moods balanced and what helps me sleep really well at night. And the more I learned and listened to that, the easier it was to choose. And then after a while, I found myself feeling like I was choosing without having to think about it.
Yes.
And I think that's true. That's being guided by what, now you're really in your body and you're really being guided. And so when I have periods of time in my life like that, I think that gets upset for me every time there's a seasonal change, because we all go through chaos and turbulence at a seasonal change, and everything changes, everything we thought we knew and all the patterns that we had created that were working for us get shifted a little bit. And that's when we can't be arrogant about the diet we are following. And we have to say, okay, what do I need now? It's a little colder. It's a little warmer. What do I need now? And so that's why I love this idea of, never rest too much on what you think works. Just keep listening.
Yes. Absolutely, absolutely. And we're going to have to wrap up soon, and I've kept you quite some time here. But one thing I want to ask you, let's close out with talking about the affirmations in the book. Because maybe some people aren't, as aware of Louise's work, of you and the work that you do. And we've kind of gone off on what to some people may seem like tangents. But really it comes down to, again, the gratitude and the forgiveness of various body parts, why these disorders are happening, right? Yeah. So let's say the person who gets migraines. When Louise wrote You Can Heal Your Life, for example, and the affirmations in this book, how does she intuit, or how does she learn, I don't know which one it is really, the emotions involved in these specific disorders?
I think she was really tapping into her intuition, and she had a very, very difficult childhood. Yeah. And you can read about that and You Can Heal Your Life. And she wanted to let everybody know that a lot of people will say, oh, well, that's well and good for you. Right. You never had cravings, so you can eat, all this crazy Whole Foods without, worrying about the French fries. Crazy Whole Foods. Only
the food that humans have eaten since the beginning of time. It's so crazy and wild.
There's a lot of judgment around, how can you say this? And she tells people what her life was like, which was incredibly difficult. Mm-hmm. She had incredibly difficult childhood. When you have a difficult childhood like that, your neurotransmitters, your brain chemicals don't behave properly. And the way we get good brain chemicals is through good nutrition. And the one thing she did have growing up was good nutrition. Right. She calls it a peasant diet. She grew up on a peasant diet, and they actually the peasant diet was the healthiest diet. It's living off the land. It's eating whole foods. She didn't have sugar in the house and things like that. So she had a good, strong foundation of nutritional health, but a horrible, horrible upbringing. Mm-hmm. And she began, as she left home at an early age and dropped out of school to run away from this awful childhood, she began to study how to feel better. Mm-hmm. And she began to heal all of those messages of not being good enough and not being able to forgive the people that abused her, and lying in bed at night and feeling scared because you're waiting for the moment when the abuser is coming, that kind of thing. Right. She had to learn how to deal with all of that and how to survive and shift the way she thought so that she could move from constantly being afraid to being safe in the world. And I think that it was through that shift that happened in the body. And this is a DNA shift. We know from epigenetics that emotions get passed through the DNA as well. So I think that when people go on a journey of healing, they're actually shifting DNA. And there's a physical and emotional, if you're willing to sort of tap in and feel into that, there's a physical and emotional shift that starts switching off genes and allowing you to shift patterns in your life. And I think that she felt that very deeply. She's a highly sensitive, and she's also a physical sensor from a Chinese medicine perspective. Mm-hmm. Her Chinese medicine energetics are being a physical sensor. That means that you can often, if you're energetically sensitive, which she is, you can feel the symptoms of other people. Yes. You can sit there and tune into someone and feel their symptoms. So I think it was a lot about how she's wired, and also the experiences that she had. And when she started studying science of mind and learning that a thought could change, you can change your thoughts to change your life, she started applying that to how can you heal your thinking, your emotions, and also therefore heal your body. And I think that it was just the unique combination of what she brought to the table that allowed her to have insight into things that if we look at them and break them down, Dr. Mona Lisa Schultz, who I work with a lot, medical intuitive, she's an MD, PhD in brain science, and she actually studied all of Louise's work. Mm-hmm. And brought all of the science to the table to say, this is brilliant stuff. Whatever she was doing to channel all of that actually has scientific backing to it. Right. So I think that there was just something really special going on through her to bring that voice out into the world. And clearly people, more than 53 million people have purchased that book. Right. So I think that people, and they call her the closest thing to a living saint. You know, so it's kind of like, I think people can feel the truth in it when they read it, because they can feel that, wait a minute, this is speaking to a part of me. And that's probably means it's speaking to our DNA that we know to be true. Right. And that if we try it and we stick to it, and she says really the best way to stick to it is to feed your body good nutrition, because now you've got everything working together. That if you stick to it, you can start to shift your patterns of thinking, which shifts your brain patterns, which your brain is in your gut and in your heart. So those tissues start to shift. And meanwhile, your whole body is starting to shift. I think that's where we get into that's the epigenetics. Our thoughts, our food, and our lifestyle can change our genes.
And I like the way, and maybe I'm misunderstanding the way it's presented in the book, but I like the way that it's presented, because it seems to me we talked about grace before, a good way to open your meal. Yes. To use these affirmations and know that you're transferring that energy from the meal into your cells.
Yes. You're adding the language of the language you want to send, the energy you want to send. It's kind of like energy medicine in a way. Yeah. You're adding that energy of what you want to send down in with the food. There are people who've, in the energy medicine world, who've done studies that you can change the energy of your food. Yes. I don't think that that's a permission to go drink Coca-Colas and hot dogs.
Unfortunately, there's a smattering of people thinking that, right?
Yeah, but I do think that there is wisdom in using the energy of prayer and the energy of mindfulness in as you eat, the energy of affirmation as you sip broth and you send that affirmation into the molecules, the water within the broth that goes into your body and can carry that language in. I think it's a beautiful thing to do. And I know that personally, without really knowing if it was going to work or not, it was one of the most healing things I did, was to be in prayer prior to my meal, during my meal, and then after my meal.
Right. Right. And how do you think other people, because again, knowing that many of us, myself included, maybe myself most guilty, become technicians, and we have to say it exactly the way she said in the book, or, if we miss the word and or whatever it is, turned it into a plural, then it's wrong. How can people get comfortable with saying those things in their own words and, kind of tapping into whatever, it may be some intuition that they don't even realize they have that makes them change the words?
I think, if you're feeling good, it's working. Just like if it smells bad, it's bad. If it feels bad, it's bad. If it feels good, it's working. There are certain principles that I think can be helpful to learn, which is why books get written. Yeah. Because we all have, even if I don't think it's appropriate for everybody to follow everything they read to the letter, but I do think there's wisdom in the guiding principles. When somebody has found a system that works, there is wisdom in guiding principles within that. And you pick the ones that work for you and you move on. So the idea of writing an affirmation or saying an affirmation in the present tense, instead of I am going to be healthy, I am healthy. Yes. That's a principle to make an affirmation more powerful. I think that's where we learn to say them in the beginning, that there are principles. Once we get those, we can say whatever we want. I mean, Louise gets in the car and she says, "Hey, baby, we're going to have a good ride today." She talks to her car. She's not like writing that one in her book, but it's like that's part of the idea of, we're going to have a good trip today. We're safe in the car. She's just bringing the idea of, in her own words, and making it fun for her, what she wants to say to bring the energy of that experience in. Yeah. So I would say to anybody, go for it and use your own words and do it the way that feels good to you. And if you feel like it's not working, go back to the book and see what maybe principles can be tweaked a little bit. Yeah, right. And sometimes other things come up that you forgot about, swept under the rug. So, look out for, read those sections again. Right. I would suggest, and say like, oh, I forgot, I have this other
thing that's been nagging me.
Right.
And I swept it under the
Exactly.
rug, right? So,
Yes.
to be ever present about that. I'm going to let everybody know where to find you, but I want to make one more comment about the book that I think is brilliant, particularly for the people who have the picky eater in the house, the child who doesn't touch whatever, because you have such a wide breadth of information in there and recipes covering everything from, like I said at the beginning, from, the breakfasts to the smoothies and desserts, chocolate cake with bone broth in it. That's all I'm saying. Okay. I know people love their chocolate. But it's not, you can do it. You can get your family to eat it. It's not like what I like about it too is it's not like that book that Jerry Seinfeld's wife wrote about sneaky whatever, Yeah. It's not like undermining what somebody wants to do, right?
Yes.
Like they're going in with their eyes wide open, or at least you write it in a way that's not in this kind of, trying to get one over on someone.
Right.
It's more about you wanting to incorporate this in as many places as possible, because you know what? I may not get to have a bowl of broth today, but because I was, running fast and I had a piece of leftover chocolate cake, I got a little something in there.
Exactly. Yes.
And that's what I like about it, is that it's not that kind of sneaky, it is called secret, but it's not from, I don't take it from the, just trying to, get one over on someone and trying to sneak something in there. It's more about, let's just see how ubiquitous we can make it.
Right.
As an
I
ingredient.
think of it as taking a digestive enzyme. You might as well put something in there that's going to help it digest. And I like the idea of eating dessert and having better skin.
Right.
It's sort of like, why not? I mean, if I love dessert. Look, I eat dessert after almost every meal. I'm a dessert lover. But I want to eat a healthy dessert that has a natural, unrefined sweetener in it.
Right.
And I want to have some health benefits if I'm going to have a dessert. But I really want to like it too.
Right.
I almost have a child's palate when it comes to making recipes. I want it to taste good for children. We actually tested recipes on children. So I think it's one of those things where, we might as well feel good about everything we're eating. It's time to stop feeling guilty about what we're eating. So it's like, if I'm going to eat something, or drink a cocktail, I want to feel like I'm getting something out of it too.
Right. Okay, great. Well, with that, I want to thank you so much for being on the show today. It was fabulous to get to know you a little bit, to learn not only about bone broth, but the what's the word I'm looking for? Just the entire food experience through your eyes and how it all relates, because it is all interrelated. Thank you. Her website, our guest heretic today, is Heather Dane. That's spelled D-A-N-E, heatherdane.com. You can find her on Facebook at Heather Dane Medicine Woman, on Twitter, Heather_Dane, and Instagram at Heather.Dane. Thank you so very much. You can visit her website for recipes and, just so much information about, how to take better care of yourself, how to have her on your podcast. So have a fantastic day, Heather.
Thank you so much, Adrienne.
And best of luck with the book.
Thank you.
The Nutrition Heretic Podcast is a production of Savor the Journey, LLC. Our audio editor is Nicola Popovich. Our podcast manager is Crystal McLean. And our operations manager is Michelle Med. I'm your host, Adrienne Hugh, the Nutrition Heretic. You can find us at the new and improved nutritionheretic.com, where you can download the Nutrition Heretic's free shit list of 7 health foods to avoid like the plague. You can also listen to previous episodes at nutritionheretic.com/podcast. Be sure to like us on social media for updates. Our Facebook page is facebook.com/nutritionheretic and on Twitter @NutriHeretic. Contact us with show ideas, questions, or if you want to be a guest. And don't forget to rate our podcast on iTunes and Stitcher.